Now, before we start talking about how to add or subtract rational expressions with the denominators that are not the same, we need to review the idea of equivalent fractions. Now, the idea here is that we have a rational expression, and we want to express that as an equivalent rational expression with a different denominator. Now, let's remember what we did in fractions. For instance, if you took 1/2, you know that that's the same thing as 2/4. That's the same thing as 3/6. And basically what I'm doing is, as long as I'm multiplying the numerator and denominator by the same amount, I get basically the same fraction, an equivalent fraction. Looks different, but it's the same. I mean, you could go all the way up to, something like 53 over 106 is equivalent to 1/2. So as long as you have that basic ratio of the numerator 1, denominator 2, okay, you've got an equivalent fraction. It amounts to the same thing. Okay, so suppose, for instance, that we have the fraction 3 over 5, and we want to express that as an equivalent fraction over 35. Now, what I do is I notice that in order to change that denominator from 5 to 35, I have to multiply by 7. Now, whatever I do in the denominator, I have to do in the numerator also. So I multiply 3 by 7 also. So this now will become 3/5 times 7 in the denominator, which is 21 over 35. And so I've expressed this 3/5 as an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 35. Okay, now let's get back to that original example up here where I want to take my first rational expression and express that as an equivalent rational expression with that denominator. Well, the first thing I notice is that this 3 over x squared minus 25, you should notice by now that you can factor that denominator. Let's rewrite that to factor that denominator. Denominator is going to look like x plus 5 and x minus 5. So we factored the denominator. Okay, now the next thing I notice is that, well, gee, in order for this denominator here to look like this denominator, I'm going to have to multiply by another factor, by an x minus 3. So similar to what I did with fractions, now I'm going to turn around and multiply the denominator by x minus 3. But if I do the denominator, remember I have to also multiply the numerator by x minus 3. Now once I do that, let's write down the equivalent fraction. It's going to be 3 times x minus 3 in the numerator, x plus 5, x minus 5, x minus 3 in the denominator. I could leave it like that if I wanted to, but I could also rewrite to expand out that numerator, 3x minus 9, all over that same denominator. So the idea here is that by looking at the factors of the original rational expression, you can change that rewrite it basically, rewrite that rational expression into an equivalent rational expression, just like we did with regular fractions, by multiplying the denominator and then the numerator by that same factor that makes it into the denominator that you want it to be. You can make it be any denominator you want, and that's the key. That's what we're going to use when we start talking about combining, that is, adding or subtracting rational expressions when the denominators are not equal to each other. Okay, and check out the next example to see how we do that.